Chairman Mike Rogers is my guest. Of course, he's chairman of the House Intelligence Committee. So, Mr. Chairman, you're in the green room a lot with people, Meet the Press yesterday, and a lot of conversations, candid conversations go on. Do you think the administration knows what hits them? We were talking about on this show 2 weeks before it happened with Charles Krauthammer and others, and people were talking and speculating that Russia might do this. But it appears to me as though Joe Biden is just not the uniquely dazed and confused person he normally is, that he's representative of the whole team.
Well, I have to tell you, I'm very disappointed in their whole national security team and advisors at this point. Everybody was having conversations, including me and the administration, about, listen, once the Olympics are over, Putin is going to refocus on the Ukraine, and he's going to refocus on those Russian ethnic folks in the South. And here's how diplomacy, I think, Hugh, missed the point, because they just refused to engage in it, thinking they don't want to get involved, and then finding armed Russian troops in the Crimea, is that we had a chance to, right after the Prime Minister gets scooted off to Moscow, the first thing the Parliament did when we took over in Kiev was to vote against the Russian-speaking ethnic language in the Ukraine. Well, that was clearly divisive. It was a bad idea. It was provocative. None of that should have happened. If the United States was engaged in a way diplomatically that they should have been in that, we could have been in the room and provided some influence about, listen, that is just asking for trouble. So they completely missed that point, which gives Putin, in his mind, a reason to send troops into the Crimea to protect ethnic-speaking Russians. And they didn't get the diplomacy right. They tell you they're all about the diplomatic end. And now they have no options because of their bad decisions, starting with the Polish and the Czech Republic rug yanking when it came to our forward deployment of radar systems for our missile defense.
But to be clear, Mr. Chairman, if shooting starts, I don't think the West has an option. I don't think we can rush reinforcements to Ukraine. I don't think that there's anything we can do at this level. Do you?
I absolutely agree with you 100%. And again, they've taken most of those options off the table. You know, for years, the last several years, our NATO partners have been scaling back their military contributions, and they've taken a lot of the teeth out of that NATO tiger, and that's what would have been a great counterweight here to at least keep the Russians in check. That's gone. The president is currently trying to restructure in a smaller way the U.S. military. That, again, I don't believe that we ought to be engaged militarily with the Russians in the Ukraine, but we had to have some counterweight that makes them think about their decisions. And the problem is we've spent all our time saying why we don't want to have any counterweight because the rest of the world is just going to be as nice as we are.
Well, that brings me...
That's not true. So that really did take away any military option. The EU has no good military option. NATO is not a good military option. Now all we have is the sanction route, and we better use it, and we better use it aggressively.
A last question. I've got, obviously, your colleagues, Cotton and Gardner, coming up. They're running for Senate. They're going to have to talk about defense spending, and Mackenzie Eaglin coming in from AEI. The Hagel budget ought to be dead on arrival. We ought to get serious about taking the president's budget and plussing it up immediately and across the board. What do you think, Mr. Chairman?
Oh, absolutely. The way they're trying to scale it back is for the world that they want us to live in. The problem, that's not the reality that we live in. And so our military budget, the defense of the United States should be our principal and primary responsibility as members of Congress of all stripes. So we should start there. And getting smaller, retreating from the rest of the world, sending messages to the Middle East, certainly to the Russians, to the Chinese, to their activities in the South China Sea. All of this will have dire consequences for the United States, for our economy, for our national security. And again, we ought to refocus this thing so that we are putting the United States in a position to protect trade around the world, to try to make these countries not make the kinds of decisions they're making. Weakness is just an invitation for provocation, and that's exactly what we're finding. You know, this new Russian-Chinese agreement on the Ukraine, boy, I tell you what, if I were Japan and Taiwan, I'd be nervous about that agreement.